Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneurial Life. I'm Clint McPherson, and today I'm going to be flying solo without my co-host, Andrew Lees. But at the end of the day, we got to keep the train rolling and we keep moving no matter what. And I'm glad to be here, like always. And we've got a very special guest on the show today. Liz is a former sheep farmer turned computer consultant who now owns a thriving coaching business for entrepreneurs. She has incredible tips about how you can get unstuck in your business and take it to the next level, all while working less. So you're going to want to listen all the way through. But before I introduce our special guest fully, I want to remind you to subscribe to our podcast and to our mailing list through our website so that you don't miss out on all the free resources we have to help you start and grow your business. With that said, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Liz Wolfe, to the show. How are you doing?
All right. Thank you so much for having me on, Clint. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, no doubt. And we've had a little bit of sidebar conversation before jumping on. And it's just good to always connect with individuals that not only want to be part of what we're doing on this podcast, but it's also part of why we do it is also help tell your story. And so people can listen that, you know, our audience can find maybe something in somebody else that they can either team up with or actually reach out for help. And so at the end of the day, Liz, I really appreciate you being here and thanks for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I love and appreciate the platform that you have for the entrepreneurs. I got to tell you, I work with entrepreneurs every day, especially newer entrepreneurs or people who are trying to get their business to the next level. And there is a dearth of resources out there. And so it's great that people have a place that they can go and support. So definitely subscribe.
100%. And I appreciate that. So Liz, like I said, it's great to have you on, but we typically start all of our episodes off with asking the most basic of questions for our our guests. And so a lot of our audience likes knowing, and we like knowing as hosts of the show, where your actual entrepreneurial journey started and what it is about entrepreneurship that really gets you fired up inside of your business and actually working with aspiring or actual entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you for asking that. And just to repeat, for those of you who missed it, my last name is Wolfe and I grew up on a sheep farm. So sometimes people don't make that connection. But when we were growing up, but when I was like 5 years old, my mother decided she had had enough of city life. So what she did was she moved to the country with me and my dad and my two sisters. And my dad is an engineer for Westinghouse for 43 years. And so he decided farming life wasn't for him. He went back to the city. We had a great relationship with him, but we had to figure out how to raise money and survive on the farm. And what a lot of people don't understand about farming is that the traditional ways of making money on a farm are pretty insufficient. So we had to be very creative. We had sheep. We had a lot of sheep. We had 300 sheep at one point. And you traditionally you just shear them and send the wool off. But we ended up creating a whole cottage industry of making and selling wool items. So from a very young age, of like the age of 12, my mother used to dress us up in colonial outfits, which is not really what a 12-year-old wants to do.
Yeah.
I have pictures to prove it. And we would go and we would spin wool and we would talk to people and we would entice people to come and buy our things. So from a very young age, I've been focused on that. And of course, eventually I moved to New York City because I was actually very interested in at that time in music. I still play the ukulele, I still sing. And that grew into me learning about technology, CRM systems, and I eventually got married and opened a CRM business with my husband. So he's still doing that to this day.
Okay.
What the turn was for me, and so I'm skipping over a lot of details, obviously. coming out of college, I didn't know what to do. All I knew was I had worked really, really hard all of my life, and I kind of didn't really want to do that farming thing anymore, which I think was something of a disappointment to my mother. So I was trying to help her out. So I opened a store in Connecticut selling some of the items that we had by then developed quite a product line. And I had no idea how to run a business. I had it wasn't authentic for me. I was just trying to help my mom. And like within 9 months, it was like, crash. So as successful as I've been in my current business, I know what it is like to feel stuck, to feel frustrated. I didn't know how to price my items. I didn't know how to attract more people to my business. I didn't know any of that stuff. Neither did my mother. And that you ask about what's my inspiration for doing what I do now, which is to coach entrepreneurs. I always think if my mother had had somebody like me, or if I had had somebody like me then who had the experience of being in business and having a successful business and helped them to get unstuck, that it would have made a huge difference for her. So probably about 8 or 10 years ago, I moved out of full-time technical consulting work and instead started focusing more just simply on coaching entrepreneurs on growing their business.
I love
that. The good news is I have lots of good sheep stories.
Yeah.
But and I got myself a country home, a few acres upstate, but no sheep.
Okay.
I don't have any sheep.
Yeah. Well, you have right off the bat, you have a great story. And like, I don't think you can start a story any better, right? By making the connection by, a sheep farmer, last name Wolfe, and then going through the things that you went through and trying to help your mother too. I mean, that's very inspiring. As far as, again, like seeing that you actually crashed, right? Or failed or tried and you had no idea about what you were actually doing. You were just trying to make it work. And that's what I think happens a lot of times is some people take the plunge too early, or at least try to get into the game a little bit too early it's like, because somebody makes it seem easier, they know somebody, or like your mother has this, line of whatever it is. And then you're like, I'm going to go help her out and we're going to be successful. And then you crash and burn. But it's really not, it's a failure that you can learn from, right? And something that you can continue to move forward and educate yourself on how to better, or how to put processes in place so that doesn't happen again. And that can be in any business. It doesn't have to be with being an e-commerce business or a clothing line or whatever you had going on at the time. It's just like, hey, how can I learn from this experience? And I think a lot of people, when they crash and burn the first time, they give up, right? Because they're like, oh man, this is not what I thought it was going to be. But life's so much easier when you have a little bit of education that goes with what you're trying to do, right? At least investing in yourself through a coach, helping guide you along the way of saying, look, this is what I want to do. I just don't know how to get there. Can you at least, again, I think more of coaching is letting people figure it out for themselves. You giving them good, actionable things and things they can action and say, hey, go sit down, quiet place, jot some things down, what gets you excited, and really get them like, their juices flowing. It's like, oh man, this is exciting. I'm sitting here writing a plan out. Now I can go and talk to you about it and you can give me some feedback, right? And I think really just having somebody, like you said, that you can lean on when you are going through that process to help open your eyes to things that you don't know. Because my thing is, when I go in, I own a digital marketing agency, and I never fault my clients for not knowing something, right? Because again, they're running a business. They have so many things going on and they don't know what they don't know. And so if I go in there and ask them questions and I get aggravated because they don't know some of the basic things that I think is basic, that doesn't mean it's basic to them, right? So it's like, I'm wasting my time by getting frustrated. I'm wasting their time by even talking to them about this right now. It's like, how can I educate them to make their learning curve less steep, right? How can I get them from point A to point Z faster so they're less stressed? They don't have to worry about failure coming so early for them. Like I can't, like if I educate somebody on something and they don't really put in action what I'm sitting there trying to help them with, then that's on them at the end of the day, right? And so for me, I think education's huge leading into anything I do with anybody. And so if they don't, like I said, I can't fault them for not knowing what they don't know. And I'm sure you're the same way.
Yeah. Well, you're bringing up so many great points. I'm like jotting down all these points I want to go back to. First of all, I have a methodology for my coaching. People always ask me, how are you going to help me? So here's what I've come up with that works. And the first step is like what you just said, is having a clear vision. So we have to know what you want, what your goals are. And again, so many of us dive right into like work, scramble, scramble, scramble. If you had asked me at that time when I was running that store, well, what's your plan? What do you want? What are you trying to create?
Right.
That's where the mission comes in. But what is your vision? And there's a big difference between vision and fantasy. And I don't have a problem with fantasy. Like I want to make $10 million a year too. Like there's nothing wrong with that fantasy. But what's missing in fantasies, or the difference between the two, is this is where people fall down on it, is they go immediately to fantasy and there's no foundation. Right. So you know how like there's all those clickbait things, like all those webinars that say, I just saw one the other day. I went from 0 to 7 figures in 1 year networking. Yeah. And of course, I'm all over that. Like, well, how do I do it? Right? Click, right? Aren't we always watching all these webinars? And I give webinars too. Webinars are great. But I could promise you this, that person did not go from 0 to 7 figures, from literally 0 to 7 figures in 1 year. There had to be some foundation there.
Exactly.
And so having that clear vision is so, so important. And then after you have the vision, and you just said it, you got to have a plan. What's your plan? I always like yell at my teenagers, what's your plan? You got to have a plan. Teenagers get in trouble when they don't have a plan. And entrepreneurs get in trouble when they don't have 100%. A plan. So, what's your plan? So what's your action? What are you going to do? So that's definitely a way, obviously I help people with their vision and then come up with a plan. Then the really important part, I think is the most important part, is all the stuff you bump up against, the hidden barriers. So I call them hidden barriers. So it's a clear vision plus purposeful action, but minus hidden barriers. Yeah. And the hidden barriers are the stuff where you wake up in the morning and you feel lethargic and you're not sure why you're not inspired, or you're not sure. I spoke to one of my clients yesterday. She's owes someone a proposal for 3 weeks. I'm like, well, that's money. Money wants to come to you. And you're like, no, I don't want money.
Yes.
So, these are the ways that we like sabotage ourselves basically, but we don't understand why. So then you also said asking questions. So really that's my role, is to ask you the questions that are going, because you don't know what you don't know. And you got to be in discovery. So once you get rid of some of those hidden barriers, then you can create breakthrough results. So that's the formula that I use. And of course, I take all my clients through that process, but I like breaking it out that way so people can see the distinction and focus on each part of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I really think, like you brought up a good point, the foundation has to be there. Like you have to have stairs. Like if I want to get to the second floor, right, and we're building a 2-story house, I have to build stairs to get there. I could do a ladder, but I'm still taking steps to get to where I want to go, right? Yeah. There's still a staircase method or a step method for me to get there. How do I get there? And then like you just mentioned about fantasy and actual reality, like, we all want the Lamborghini, or to be taking the video by this and having all this money, or working on the beach while we're making money and not actually working, right? It's like they have these illusions from these webinars. Like you said, it's like, I call it the shiny object syndrome, right? We're following like, what's the easiest way for me to get to this? Instead of saying, okay, this path's not going to be easy as an entrepreneur. I got to know there's obstacles, right? Like you said, that they're hidden things that get in your way, but those are obstacles and clutter that you got to learn how to push through and continue to move forward. And my thing is if that foundation is there and you know the steps you need to take because you planned, you will eventually get there. But you also got to know exactly what makes you tick, what gets you motivated, what is the time of day is very important, right? Like, when am I most effective? Some people can't work for 10 hours a day, and because again, you're only effective for a certain amount of time during that period. Like, if you go to somebody and watch, and if you film, like, my wife works in the corporate world, I guarantee if I filmed her working for a day, she's sitting there knocking things out, and maybe her 10-hour day is really like a 4-hour day of hard work, and everything else is putting out fires, talking to this employee or doing that. And it's not real. It's like, why? I think the system's broken to a certain degree. It's like, because again, the longer you work, the less effective you are over that certain period of time. Because again, you can only focus for so long without getting, before you get tired, before you're hungry, before you need to take a break. Right. And so your mind starts shutting down. And so I just thought, when I was in the military, it was one of those things. I always had a set time. I knew when I was going to plan a mission, this is the time I'm going to do it, because my mind is like completely focused right now. I can knock it out. I know what we're going to do in 2 days, so I can rehearse with my team. I can rehearse with my platoon and make sure that at the end of the day, I'm doing my job and bringing everybody home, And so that's my way of how I approach it. And I really love that you brought the foundation point into it, because it's really, really important to at least start with a foundation, or at least coming up with that plan, so you know how you're going to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. The other thing about that is that when you're in action, you don't realize what makes you tired. And part of what makes you tired is those hidden barriers that just slow you down. And I always tell my clients that there's two values to being in action. There's the obvious one that everybody talks about, which is, if you don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. Like, my friend and I have we have a joke between us. She's like, well, it's funny. When I don't do things, things don't get done. We're like, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. How did that happen? I didn't do it, and it didn't get done. Geez. Right. So when you don't do things, things don't get done. That's number one, obvious. But if you're not doing it, we got to figure out why you're not doing it. So it could be during the day, when are you motivated? What motivates you? All those things. Also, the value, I think, the other value of setting goals and getting into action is that you will bump into those hidden barriers. Exactly. And because here's the deal. We all know what to do. Everybody could be in top physical condition. We could all be, multimillionaires. We all know. I've never spoken to someone who said to me, I don't know what to do at all.
Right.
They may not be doing it, but they know what to do. So the value of doing it is saying, okay, if at the end of that, so my clients will come back to me. I talk to people every 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, they'll say, and I keep track. So I say, well, you said you were going to send out that proposal. And then she said, no, I didn't do that. So it was 1 week. Now it's 3 weeks. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to just have you put that on your goal list again.
Right.
Because if you didn't do it for 3 weeks, you're not going to do it in 5 weeks. You're just not. So that's when we have to get into the conversation. Well, what is it about that? And it turns out there's a bunch of things in there. So one of the tricks that I tell people when you're procrastinating, or when you're finding that you're not taking action, is instead of saying what everybody says, which drives me crazy, I just have to do it. If you just had to do it, you would just do it already. Like, sometimes you just have to do it, but sometimes you just were supposed to do it and you didn't do it. So things get done if you're not doing it. So I say, instead of saying all the other stuff like, it's because I'm not disciplined, or I'm not focused, or I'm lazy, or I don't know what to do, or all that stuff, take all that away. And then I say, what am I resisting right now? What is the main resistance I have to this? And anytime I've ever asked anybody that question, and they've truthfully, authentically thought about it, they can identify what they're resisting. And yesterday, when I was talking to that client about that proposal, she's like, well, the truth is, I think I'm charging too little, and I don't want to give them the proposal until I figure, okay, now we know what to work on. You got money concerns, and you're afraid to raise your prices. That's a whole different conversation than, why didn't you just do it by now?
Exactly.
And now we can get into a whole different conversation. So that's where it comes in really valuable. valuable to set those goals and get into action. And then check in with yourself. What am I resisting? Why am I not doing this?
Yeah. Getting down to the root of the problem, is always a little bit deeper than initially on the out. Initially we might connect it to something else in our mind. But when you start asking questions like a coach, like, you know the layers to pull back, right? Because you're like, okay, you're not charging this client. So there has to be there are several reasons that this can be. So let's really get down to why this is. And so like right, the failure of not, or the being in a place of not knowing your worth or the job at hand and not being able to put a price tag on that, or the fear of failure, right? Failing at the end of the day, or the fear of success. I mean, those are things that like can pull at all of us as entrepreneurs or individual business owners that really, get us struggling. And with that, and I know we've talked about several things right now, but what's the number one reason you see people getting stuck in business? And then on top of that, what's one tactic or if you have a procedure that you go through to help them get unstuck?
Great question. And thank you for asking that. So I think that if I ask the question, what do you think, if I were to ask anybody, like an entrepreneur person who's out there working, right? If I were to say, what do you think the three most important things are that you can do to get your business going? They would say probably these three things. They would say, you got to work really hard / be really disciplined and focused, and have good time management. So that's one. Okay. Another one is you got to get to know the right people somehow. You got to get out there. You got to network. You got to connect with the right people. And the third one, which I see a lot in with the people I'm coaching, because I happen to coach a lot of also other coaches and things, there's a lot about credentialing. You have to get educated or get experience. Like I can't charge more because I've only been doing this for a year. I had one client who was like, well, I don't know. I never got any results. How do I tell people what results they're going to get? I'm like, okay, because she's like, I'm not experienced. I'm just starting out. Now, I don't ever buy that from anyone that they don't have those results. I know they do. It's like building a resume. You always have things you can put on it. So I say to people, working hard / time management, discipline, focus, getting to know the right people is helpful. And, you need to have some knowledge and expertise. Yeah. Those are really good tools in your entrepreneurial toolbox. But there's a big problem with all three of those. And the big problem is that if you aren't disciplined or focused, if you don't know the right people, or you don't have the experience or credentials, then you feel like, oh, I'm stuck. I got to work harder at being disciplined, or I got to go to a million networking events, or I got to take 5 credentialing programs, or, I've taken 3 $10,000 programs. And I always tell people, I took those $10,000 programs so you don't have to, because I know you don't have to take them. Okay. So, those are great. Put them in your entrepreneurial toolbox, but they're all what I would call as soon as conversation. As soon as I get disciplined, as soon as I get that credential, as soon as I meet the right people. So I'm always on like this side of the success of that.
Right.
So what I developed instead was I created what I call the 3 keys to an abundant business, because they don't have anything to do with anybody else but you. And so here's what those are. The first one is ask powerfully. The second one is give wholeheartedly. And the third one is receive graciously. None of those have anything to do with anyone else. So as an example, asking powerfully might mean putting together a proposal and asking for the price that you want, not going back and trying to figure out what's the client willing to pay for, but what are you charging, right? So asking, I got a lot more to say about what asking powerfully means, but the best thing you can do, the most important thing you can do is get bold about making big asks. And that's one of the reasons why she wasn't doing that proposal. The give wholeheartedly part is, depending on where you are in the spiritual spectrum of the law of attraction and and the different spiritual modalities that are out there. Giving is an energetic exchange. So when you, if you feel like you're not getting clients, excuse me, you can help other people get clients.
Right.
So you can get that energy going. And then the receive graciously part is really about, a lot of us don't receive. You mentioned fear of success. That is about being able to receive success. That's what that's all about.
Yeah.
And receiving, a lot of people, fantasy want money, but in reality, when, like that woman with the proposal, when it's coming to them, they're like, no, and they push it away.
Right.
So there again, I have a lot more about those 3 keys that I can offer. But you'll notice that none of them have to do with getting better at anything, learning more, having anybody else come and help you out, any of that stuff, because everybody can ask, everybody can give, and everybody can receive.
Yeah, I love that. I really think, again, like you said, it's almost being, for the first step when you're talking about just be more bold and asking for the price that you want, instead of trying to figure out, okay, what's the client's budget? If that's a conversation that you haven't had already, or at least know what they're willing to spend, and then come up with a competitive pricing, that, again, that's something that you need to work on. But I think it's just being confident in your ability. I think, and coming and making sure, again, that you're that individual that just is more bold, like you said, and confident in what you're trying to put together. Because I think at some point you have to be confident, right? Even if you're faking it till you make it, which I don't 100% agree with. But again, if you're getting into a business, like you said, you have to have some kind of knowledge on that, or something in that business has to get you excited for you to want to learn more. Because if you're not continuously educating yourself to a degree in your niche or your space that you're trying to succeed in, you're going to keep coming up short, and you're never going to be confident. Right. And so I think, again, I don't have to know anything about anything. You just, if I want to sell somebody on something I don't know anything about, I'm going to go educate myself for a good 30 minutes, to where I'm like, okay, all this information that just flooded me, now I got enough information where I can flood them. Right. And so I can go and be bold and confident in knowing that I watched a 30-minute video on this on YouTube, maybe. Right. And I'm going to come bring the heat, and you're going to be like, okay, you're going to be asking me questions, and I'm just giving you stuff that I just heard 30 minutes ago. Right. And so people do that. And I know friends that have done that. And it was almost like, I'm faking it till I make it. And then they actually get confident enough, because they took that 30-minute video, they turn it into selling somebody on something. Then they outsourced it to somebody. And then now they're making money. And now it's like, oh man, if I continuously educate myself, which I should have done in the first place before I started my business, or at least have a starting point or a foundation to work from, then I wouldn't be having to really fake it till I make it. I just continue to educate myself, and I'm just doing it. And so that's a thing that I just think when you come back to it, you have to be bold. You have to be, that person that just comes with that confidence. Because if I'm sitting there with a client, they don't know me, I'm trying to bridge that gap. I'm trying to make that relationship grow quicker. And that's why I like the physical, like being in person, or a Zoom, to where, hey, they can see me, I can see them. It's not all this email stuff or a text message or an email communication, because all that stuff could get misconstrued, and you can't really tell what it is really in a person's heart by not seeing them face to face, I don't think. And so I've always had greater relationships, and the clients that I've met in person or actually on a conference call always have stayed with me, compared to somebody that like hired me to do SEO for their website. And then it was like, I never met them. We traded some emails. I did some services for them, and they'll typically leave because that relationship is not like you need it to be.
Yeah. Okay. I'm writing notes because you're saying so many wonderful things. So here's the thing about fake it till you make it. I mean, we've all heard that,
Yeah.
You make it right. Like that woman was saying, I didn't have any experience. How could I don't have any results? Right. Okay. So there's actually 4 things that I want to go back to. First of all, what I learned about fake it till you make it is it's about what you're committed to. So what I heard in your story when you were saying, I want to watch this video.
Right.
What I heard was you're committed to what people are buying from you is value. That is what they are buying. They are buying results. I'm sure
100%.
we've all heard the analogy of like when you go to a store to buy a screw to hang something on your wall, you're not selling them the screw. You're hanging them the ability to hang that picture on the wall so that they can have a beautiful home. Right. See, that's the vision, a beautiful home. That's why they need the screw that's the right size. So if you just look at it like, I'm going to sell you the screw that's the right size, they're going to be like, that's boring. I'm out of here. But if they see the value, like they can see the vision through, and that's why the vision's so important. So the fake it till you make it is really about what am I committed to? So if you can get out of the problem with the fake it till you make it is imposter syndrome creeps 100%. In. Like I'm faking it, and somebody's going to find out I'm faking it. Right. But if you say, I don't know, to yourself, you're not going to say this to them. You're going to say to yourself, I don't know, but I'm committed to creating value for this person.
Right.
What can I do to create value? I could educate myself. I could watch a video. I could ask questions. I can find out if I'm even a fit. What's their problem? There's so many things you can do before you even get to the solution.
Right.
And find out what would be valuable to him. That's the key to selling. And then the other thing you brought up, which is the relationship. Nobody makes sales calls anymore. I say that, like, make a sales call. Nobody does that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but that is how you make. If I'm interviewing a prospective client on Zoom, I'm more likely to land that client through Zoom than I am if I just talk to them on the phone or if they just saw me on my website. So, 100%. But how do you create a relationship with them? You're committed to creating value for
right.
that. And one other thing about that is, and then that's what builds up the confidence. Well, one other thing about that is, what was I going to say? Creating, okay, I'm not sure what I was going to say. It'll come back to me. So, but it's there. But yes, so, I know what it was. So for all those years that I was training people on how to use computer systems, every once in a while, a client would call up and they're like, we've been using CRM for 20 years and we need some help. And I'd be going in there like, what the hell am I going to show these people? 20 years I've been using CRM. I've been doing this 6 years,
Right.
I always know more than they do.
Yeah.
I call my program the 1 step ahead program because I'm just 1 step ahead of where you are. I don't need to be 100 steps ahead. All I ever did in those situations is I went in, I asked questions, I listened, I figured out what their problem was, and I was committed to creating value. I didn't have to fake anything because I was very authentic about it. And it never failed that at the end of the day, people go, wow, okay, I really learned a lot. And I'd be like, let me get out of here. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, with you bringing that up, I mean, that's perfect because it like you said, like continuing just to be that 1 step ahead. Like you really don't realize, I think, as entrepreneurs, when we're offering a service to somebody, unless they've been through like this, the 10th person offering them whatever it is. Like they might have educated themselves by now because they're like, dude, these people are garbage. I'm not working with them. I already know more than this other person just try to bring value to me. And it's like, again, if you continue to educate yourself in the value that you're delivering, you're always that 1 step ahead. I really think, again, when I first got into the digital marketing game 5 years ago, I really it wasn't a fake it till I make it approach. It was more like, let me continue to educate myself. So when I'm always talking to this client, like I have a solution to their problem, but I'm always trying to be 1 step ahead or 5 steps ahead, at least ahead enough so I can actually land the client, right? Because if they know that you know more than them, they're actually going to do business with you most of the time, especially if you're saying the right things. And I know some clients educate themselves on a basic level to know, like they might ask you like some really basic questions. And you're just like, oh, this is easy, and it's a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, and again, that imposter syndrome and that fear of not landing a client goes out the window because it's like, oh man, they just, threw the ball up for me to hit it with his bat and I'm good to go, and then you start getting into your rhythm and you start feeling that confidence that comes along with, again, being 1 step ahead or multiple steps ahead because you put yourself in a good position. And I think as individuals, we got to continue to work for that. And then if we have a doubt in our head, again, that's an obstacle, right? So if I'm like, hey, I don't know how to price this client, Like, why don't you know? Why are you scared to lose the client, right? If they say no, you have to face the fear of rejection. You're going to hear more no's than you hear yeses, at the end of the day, especially if you have competitive pricing or you're putting prices out there that is worth every penny that they're going to pay. It's like, my package is higher than this person for sure, but this is what you get with it. And this is why it's better. Right. And you really have to have those unique selling points, and you have to sell your client on those unique selling points so you can show them why you're different and why you're more valuable at the end of the day. And I really think sticking to your prices instead of adjusting for this and that, because hey, you start now you're opening a can of worms, and you're just like, you don't know how to close that can of worms, So
yeah, and pricing is a whole other we could have a whole other
conversation about that.
On that. But I do want to go back to something you actually said earlier about, knowing that you're worth it. I want to say, I know that's a very common way of describing, justifying your pricing. Like, well, I'm worth it. I think that's only temporarily helpful, to be honest. Nobody, I'm going to tell you a fact. Nobody gives you money because you deserve it.
Oh, 100%.
Or are worth it, right? They don't care about that. They're only giving you money because they think you can solve their problem.
Right.
And why do they think you can solve their problem? Because you've created that relationship with them and you've delivered value for them, or they see that you can solve their problem. So if you want to say, here's my point. You don't ever have to justify anything.
Yeah.
You don't have to justify how much you don't have to say, well, I'm worth it, so I'm going to justify it. All you have to do is say, this is my pricing. And then you can go to the market, and sometimes people will buy it and sometimes they won't. So
right.
What you just said about how does your system work? You have to be able to explain to people, how does your system work? How is it that you're going to be able to help people?
Right.
And then you got to learn from them what their problem is, because they're not going to buy. They're going to buy from you if they think you can help them. That's the bottom line. Not because 100%. They're like, you know what, he seems like a nice guy and he deserves it, so let me give him.
Not. And so what I was saying is really convincing yourself, right, with the people that are struggling with, how do I price this? Is like, at the end of the day, you got to tell yourself you're worth it, right? You have to. Like, I'm getting up every day because everything I've built is this is the pricing structure that I came up with, and I got to stick to it, right? I'm not justifying to my clients, this is why I do this.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's more like, I have a unique selling point, so I come at them from that angle, right? And it's not really, okay, I'm justifying my prices, but this is the reason, in my mind, this is why I do it. So it's easier for me to sell somebody, because again, my angle and my methods are going to be different than some of the people they've used in the past, for sure. And so I really think, again, coming full circle with just educating your clients, right, on why your solution is better at the end of the day.
Yeah, this goes back to the asking powerfully, or the asking boldly, which is that literally, I did one webinar once, and I loved the guy. I don't remember what his name was, but I still remember him looking. It was a chat webinar, so I wasn't able to. He didn't see me, but I asked a question like, well, how do you ask a price that high? Or where'd you get that price or something? And he looked directly in the camera. He was just like, I just made it up. I just said, that's the price.
Right.
And I just really liked him. I didn't end up working with him, but I was just like, yeah, I just said that was the price. And that's what asking powerfully is. It's saying, this is the price.
Yeah.
And then you got to, sometimes you got to do the market research, but I could tell you there are coaches that are charging $50 an hour, and there are coaches that are charging $10,000 an hour.
Oh, 100%.
So there's no right price.
Right.
At all. So asking powerfully means boldly just putting down what your price is and asking for it. And then you mentioned too, you're not bringing it down to accommodate. We're not here to solve other people's money problems.
Exactly.
That's not why we're here. Another client of mine was doing a sliding scale for a $35 to $55 workshop. And I was like, okay, if the people that are coming can't pay $55, they can't hire you. Right. Why are we opening the door? I'm not give away, do a lot of free stuff for people, give value. That's content marketing, do that. But if somebody can't go from 35 to 55,
Right.
then they're probably not your client. And she said,
Exactly.
okay, she was like, all right, I want to do it. She put it at 55 for this workshop, and she sold out in 3 days, 20 people
Yeah.
immediately. Now she's got this waiting list. And she could, I guarantee you at least half of those people would have said, well, I'll pick the 35. And why
Right.
wouldn't they? Of course they're going to pick the 35.
Especially if you give them the option.
Right.
100%. I mean, look, she could have done the 75, 55, right? But like when you give people option, you like you have to stick to a price. Like just go to one price. And again, like you just said, which is perfect. If they can't afford the $55, like that's not your target audience anyways, or that's not the people you want to do business with. Because again, I owning a small business and working with small business owners, I made that mistake early on and having those price fluctuations from time to time. And I was like, this is not working. This is terrible. Like I'm doing the same amount of work and getting paid less over here than over here because I'm trying to help this client out. And then this client, because I'm giving them such a low price, and then I'm trying to, like, when they come back and ask for something lower, and I'm like, look, I'm already head over heels with what I'm kind of doing right now and trying to stay above the water and really break even right now because I've really messed myself up. And then like, well, I found somebody else that can do it for this. And it's like, well, good luck, like have fun with that because I can't go any lower. And you don't want to be in that game. That is a game that you are going to continuously coming up for air underwater. You're just like, just trying to survive. And
no, forget about it.
That was not a way I wanted to work. And so and my thing was, hey, finding those prices, this is what it is. And if you can afford it, great. If you can't, we just, at the end of the day, it's just, you're not the right fit.
Yeah. There was actually one of my clients who I was giving a discount to, and he decided he was complete at some point. I said, okay, what are you going to do now? He's like, well, I found this training. It was like a $5,000 training. I'm like, why am I giving you, everybody has a story like that. So
Right.
Ever since then, I was just like, look, now that's not to say that we're trying to gyp people or be mean or any
Right,
of that
100%.
stuff. But there's plenty of people out there that have money, and there's plenty of ways to provide value to people. Like I have a lot of free resources on my website. You can go there. I do free webinars. You can download stuff. You can do free trainings. There's all kinds of free stuff. First, because I want you to get a taste of what I do. So that's important.
Right.
We all know about freebies. We all know about that, the tripwires and all that. But at the end of the day, I have only a certain amount of resources and time available to commit to my clients. I have a pretty full client list. And I want to maximize that time. And the other thing we know about money is that the more people pay, the more committed they are.
Yeah.
And
100%.
those people that are paying more, for the most part, the people that are paying more are the ones that are showing up every time they did the work.
Yeah. And they understand the value that they're getting from you. That's the thing is like, again, when you can get your clients to value your value, right? It makes life much easier. And I think when we get so used to being abused, like again, when I was doing what I was doing, like just to stay afloat, I was like, okay, I'll do it because it's money. But then it was like, okay, I'm doing it. Now I'm losing money. Like, oh, what was I thinking? And again, I think as an entrepreneur, you can make those mistakes. I'm going to take this case or I'm going to take this, job or whatever, because it's green. And you got to stay. There's so many red flags that I started seeing that like you start noticing. You got to turn away and just break free of that stuff again, because you're going to bog yourself down. You're not going to progress anywhere. It's just going to be like this just cycle of endless, what am I doing? And Groundhog's Day in it. And you don't want to be there. I promise you that.
Yeah, that is for sure. There's what I love, money is energy. And so how the energy you put into it, I always tell people, it's like a dog. You got to take care of it. You got to feed
Sure.
it. You got to walk it. You got to love it. You can't just have it. If you don't want to do that, get a house plant.
Yeah.
Okay. And even then I don't water them. So, there's a lot of ways you could treat your business that way. Is it a house plant?
Yeah.
Is it a cat or is it a dog?
Right.
So, money's like a dog. You got to love it. You got to appreciate it. And you can't, it's going to be like, oh, that's it. And then it's going to say, well, I guess you don't want any money because you keep saying you don't want it. And that goes to the receiving graciously part. People say they want money. And I can tell you this from decades of research and personal experience. you say you want money more than you're ready to receive it.
Yeah.
And because people will say, oh, they don't deserve to charge that much. Or like, I remember Madonna, when she was first coming out, it's like, Madonna's not that great. Why has she got all these big records? Guess what? Madonna didn't care how great she was.
Right.
She thought she was great, but she didn't care about that. She cared about how to market herself so that people bought her stuff. And she asked for what she asked for, and she was ready to receive that. And so a lot of us, I'm going to challenge everybody listening to this right now. You say you want to receive money, but a lot of times you're not receiving money. And there's everybody I know leaves money on the table. You leave money on the table because you don't put proposals out. You leave money on the table because you don't follow up with clients. You leave money on the table because people owe you money and you don't follow up with them. Expense reports that you don't submit. There's you don't bill for the actual hours that you actually worked. You let your calls go on too long. I'm notorious for that. You don't pay attention to whether people paid you on time. There's so many ways we leave money on the table. And then in the next breath, we say, oh, but I want to make $1 million a year. I want to go from 0 to 7 figures. No, you don't. And I'm saying that with pure love in my heart for you. And I say, no, you don't, because there's fear, there's hidden barriers in there that is keeping you from doing that. And so that's where practicing receiving, looking to where you can receive and going and watering those plants and feeding that dog is really going to make a difference for you.
100%. Love that. So Liz, through your entrepreneurial journey, from the highs and the lows that you've experienced to date, what has been the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur or about being where you are at today?
Oh, I know exactly when that moment was. When I started the business. My husband had no one in his family who was entrepreneurial. He's from Queens. I'm from Western PA. I came to New York and met him. We found love, we were married, and he had a 9-to-5 job, just like my dad. And meanwhile, I'm like going from this place to that place and learning, CRM, and I'm doing all this stuff. And I was like, why don't you quit your job and come work with me? So I convinced him to do that. So he took a very big risk. When he came, so think to my mom who's saying, why don't we buy a farm, Bob? Okay, Dolores, right? That didn't turn out so well, right? My dad went back to Pittsburgh and the rest is history. So it was a risk to begin with. So he took it on. He's very deliberate. Talk about discipline, very deliberate, very disciplined, very successful work. So things are going fast forward 10 years, 15 years. And now I'm like, I'm kind of bored. This is not what I want to be doing anymore. I did CRM. I did training. I'm done. I want to do business coaching. I want to do this $10,000 train the training program, first of all. So that was an investment. And I remember literally laying, we're married, so we're laying in bed and I'm next to him. And I'm like trying to convince him that I should do this $10,000 program. And he's saying, what's wrong with what we have right now? All you have to do is just keep doing this. And I all the fears, like if I go off and do this, everybody in my family, including my 2 sisters, but right down to my generation, they're all divorced.
Yeah.
So the fear came up in me, like, if I make this move, I'm putting my whole marriage at risk. Now I've got 2 kids. I've got a townhouse in New York. I got financial obligations. I got this country house. I got all this stuff, right? And I'm saying, no, honey, I want to go do this. And it took a while to get the crowbar and wrench it away. I mean, it wasn't an immediate thing. I think it was another 3 or 4 years of still going and doing technology and everything. And I slowly pried myself away and I supported him as much as I could. We got an employee to replace me. We did the whole thing because it was so important to me that we stay married, for crying out loud, 25 years this fall. And be, and work and have kids and all that stuff. So that was there was a couple of years there was really, really tough. And I see so many times where people are not willing to take a risk. People will come to me and go, I don't know, maybe I should just get a job.
Yeah.
Please don't get a job. Please don't get a job. And I can't say that out loud because I'm not going to tell you how to run your financial life.
Right.
But I know you don't want a job.
Right.
I know you're an entrepreneur and you don't want a job. So those are those like moments of real fear, of risk. Like I'm really putting something at stake here. And we shifted that conversation. So now, I had to grow my side of the business again. It was like starting all over.
Yeah.
But he was there and he keeps going. And now, we have an office here and we're still working together and I still support him.
That's awesome.
So we got through that. Yeah.
Great story. Yeah, no doubt. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as we wrap up this episode, Liz, if you could leave our listeners with a piece of advice or a key takeaway or some actionable items that they can action today after listening to this episode, what would it be?
Well, I definitely would say I have a free training that I can offer you, which we'll put in the show notes for you. It's on my website, lizwolfecoaching.com/3 keys. It's a 5-day 3 keys to abundant business challenge. It's a 5-day business abundance challenge. And each day I go into the ask powerfully, give wholeheartedly, receive graciously. And it's a 5-day challenge. Even if you don't do the challenge part, listen to it. If I could leave you with anything, it would be this. Practice asking. Start with that. Think to yourself, what could I do? What in every conversation, what could I ask for here? And I don't want you to hear that, what can I get away with? That's not the way I'm saying it. What I'm saying is, what could you be bold about asking? And we only very briefly talked about rejection. But the big reason people don't ask is because they're a fear of rejection.
Yeah.
So there's an awesome TED Talk that I can also give you the information about, 100 Days of Rejection. You should go and watch that. It's a really awesome TED Talk. And this man went out deliberately to get rejected. So put a chart on your wall with a bunch of circles and make that many asks. Make 5 asks a day. Don't worry about whether you're getting rejected or not. Fill in those little spots and you will get better and better and better at it. And then that gives you what you talked about earlier, which is the confidence. That's the way to build up your confidence. It's not about the result. It's about the action that you're taking.
Yeah. Love that. I think momentum has a lot to do with it, right? It's like you get that confidence, you land that first person, even though you've been rejected 10 times. You land that first person, and then the momentum, the law of attraction, all that stuff kicks in, and you start building. Oh man, your confidence is through the roof. Okay, it's going to take me 10 more people to get another ask or another yes. Then let's do it. Like that's where you need to get to. You need to get to the point where you're fine with being rejected, but you're still seeking that yes or that yes, let's do this. And my thing is like, for me, it was one of those things like, what am I doing wrong? Why do they keep saying no? Like, but from the beginning, my first conversation, which really helped me, was talking digital marketing with a local business owner and landing him right away. And for the first several clients, no rejection. And then I started getting rejected. But so I was like, I saw the success on the front end. And then so I started getting rejected towards the middle. And then my confidence level kind of went down a little bit. Cause I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Like the universe at one time was telling me yes. Like my wife was like, you just need to meet and sit down with all your clients. And what happened was I broke away from actually sitting down and building that relationship, meeting face to face. And it was more of a, hey, I'm going to go behind the scenes and do this communication. That's where I started failing. And I was like, man, well, it's not as easy when you're doing it behind an email or when you're doing it, over the phone compared to a Zoom or an actual coffee, right? And actually meeting that person where you can really like see them and tell that they're genuine people. And so I really think figuring that out was a huge help for me.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier for sure. Look, create relationship with people, be authentic, be committed to creating value for them. Don't worry about rejection. If you ever want to know how many opportunities there are, come to New York City. If you're not nearby, come to New York City on rush hour, get on the train and just stand around, not so much in COVID, but I used to do that. I used to stand on the train. I was like, there are so many people. There are 8 billion people on this planet.
Yeah.
Even if you got 1/10 of 1% of 1/100th of anything of that, there's so much opportunity. You will never reach the limit of your opportunity. So don't worry about rejection. worry about your technique, worry about the value that you're creating for people, but don't worry about rejection, because there's more people. Just come to New York City and walk around and be like, there's plenty of people.
100%. Well, Liz, I think I can sit here and talk to you all day.
Yes,
thank you for joining me. That's a wrap for this episode. And if my co-host was on from the both of us, we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and adding value to what we're doing on our podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Clint. This has been a great conversation. And I really want to support everybody out there listening to listen to all these Entrepreneur Life episodes, because they're tremendously valuable. Keep going, reach out, do what you need to do, and you'll be good.
I appreciate it. It's really been a pleasure, Liz. Thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Liz is working on, check out lizwolfecoaching.com. She also has the lizwolfecoaching.com/3 keys. Check that out as a free resource. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe to our podcast, and don't forget to download our free ebook about the success mindset at thatentrepreneurlife.com. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, and don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.